Ever climbed a mountain just to collect some data? I can't say I have, but that's exactly what Alexander von Humboldt did.
And not just any mountain. We're talking Chimborazo, this absolutely massive volcano in Ecuador.
Okay, so picture this. 1802, Humboldt's on this grueling climb. I mean, we're talking bleeding feet, shredded shoes, gasping for air at 19,000 feet.
All in the name of science.
Now that's dedication. But you're right, this wasn't about conquering the mountain for him. This was about something much bigger, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was this burning desire to understand, how all the pieces of the natural world fit together.
To reveal the connections that maybe others were missing.
Exactly. Humboldt, well, he wasn't content with just collecting specimens in a lab. No, he craved a holistic view. He recognized that each element, from the tiniest insect to that grand volcano, plays a role.
In this intricate web of life, as they say.
Exactly.
So how does a mind like that come to be? What kind of upbringing creates someone obsessed with climbing mountains for data?
Well, Humboldt wasn't your typical scientist, that's for sure. Born into privilege, you see. Prussian aristocracy, a wealthy family, the whole 9 yards.
So not exactly roughing it from day one.
Not exactly. And his older brother, Wilhelm, now he was more the traditional type, excelled in academia. But Alexander, he was drawn to something else entirely. The wild, those untamed corners of the globe.
A bit of a restless spirit, then.
You could say that. He devoured explorer journals, dreamt of lush tropical landscapes. Even as a child, wandering through the Berlin botanical gardens, he'd be yearning for more. He'd be looking at those plants, but imagining them in their natural environment.
Okay, so we've got this thirst for adventure, this urge to explore. But how did that fit into the whole scientific landscape of the late 18th century? It seems a bit unconventional for the time.
Oh, it absolutely was. Back then, science was, well, often confined to those laboratories, focused on, dissecting, categorizing.
Breaking things down into their smallest parts.
Precisely. But Humboldt, he wasn't satisfied with observing nature's components in isolation. He wanted to understand the system as a whole, to grasp the forces connecting it all.
And that meant, what, pushing the boundaries of what even counted as science?
Exactly. And speaking of pushing boundaries, have we talked about his fascination with animal electricity?
Oh, yeah. That wasn't exactly your typical scientific inquiry.
Definitely not. His experiments with galvanism were, let's just say, intense. We're talking thousands of experiments on frogs, lizards, even himself.
Wait, himself?
Oh, yeah. He used his own body as a conductor to understand how electricity worked within living organisms.
Now that's commitment. But it speaks to his drive, doesn't it? This almost relentless need to understand the mechanisms of life itself. And speaking of driving forces, we can't talk about Humboldt without mentioning his relationship with Johann Wolfgang von Goethe.
Of course not. Goethe, the renowned poet, playwright, and scientist, had this incredible impact on Humboldt's thinking.
I mean, what was it about that relationship that so profoundly shaped him, you think?
Well, picture this. Humboldt's brother, Wilhelm, resided in Jena at the time, a real hub of intellectual ferment. And Goethe, he lived nearby in Weimar. So whenever Humboldt visited, their shared fascination with science, with animal electricity, it ignited this incredible friendship.
So it was more than just a casual acquaintance. They really connected on an intellectual level.
Oh, absolutely. Kindred spirits. They'd conduct experiments together, debate, challenge each other's thinking, and it was that constant exchange of ideas that was so crucial.
Pushed him beyond just the data points.
Exactly. He began to see those invisible threads that bound nature together, much like Goethe sought to weave together emotion, science, art, all those things in his own work.
That's fascinating. To think a simple friendship could have such a profound impact on someone's entire life's work. But before we get too caught up in the intellectual whirlwind of their relationship, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Humboldt's decision to embark on his South American adventures. Choosing that part of the world in that specific historical moment, it wasn't random, was it?
Not in the slightest. See, Humboldt yearned for the tropics. Remember those palms in the Berlin botanical gardens?
The ones he imagined in their natural habitat.
Exactly. South America represented the unexplored, the exotic. It was a chance to observe nature on this grand scale, this chance to witness firsthand that interconnectedness that so captivated his mind.
Yeah, but it's one thing to, dream of those landscapes and quite another to actually get there. I'm guessing there was more to it than just scientific curiosity, right?
Right. Right. We have to remember the context here. I mean, South America at the time was, well, a Spanish colony.
Ah, so there's the political layer.
Exactly. And Humboldt, he wasn't just observant of the natural world, he was also keenly aware of human nature, of the tensions simmering beneath the surface.
Okay, so you've got this aristocratic European scientist venturing into this colonial landscape, a landscape already brimming with social and political unrest. What was he hoping to achieve?
It was a delicate dance, that's for sure. He needed the Spanish crown's permission, their support, to actually conduct these expeditions. But at the same time, he harbored these deep criticisms of colonialism, of its impact on the indigenous populations, on the environment.
So he was walking a tightrope.
Absolutely, a contradiction even. And he grappled with that tension throughout his travels. But that internal struggle, well, it's part of what makes him so fascinating, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. It adds this whole other dimension. He wasn't just compartmentalizing, just sticking to the science.
Exactly. He was able to hold those opposing viewpoints, draw insights from both his scientific data and those social injustices he was witnessing.
It's like those two things were feeding off each other in a way.
In a way, yeah. It wasn't always pretty, but it was insightful.
So he wasn't just mapping mountains and bagging plant samples. He was engaging with the the human element, grappling with the consequences of colonial rule.
Absolutely.
And speaking of which, you mentioned Lake Valencia earlier. Didn't Humboldt make some pretty startling observations about human-induced climate change while he was there?
He did. Lake Valencia was a turning point. He noticed the lake's water levels receding, the surrounding land becoming barren, and get this, he was the first to connect that ecological damage to deforestation, to the clearing of land for agriculture.
Hold on. He was sounding the alarm on climate change back in the early 1800s.
Essentially, yes. He was way ahead of his time.
Wow, that's incredible. Talk about seeing the bigger picture. But let's be honest, this is Humboldt we're talking about, the guy who climbed a volcano for data. What other groundbreaking discoveries did he bring back from these expeditions?
Where to even begin? We're talking an astounding amount of data here. Thousands of plant specimens, detailed maps, meteorological records, insights into indigenous cultures. It's honestly hard to overstate the sheer volume and variety of his findings.
All right, I get it. The man was prolific. But paint me a picture of these expeditions. What were some of the challenges he faced, the moments that really capture the essence of those journeys?
All right, so imagine this. You're navigating the Orinoco River, hacking through dense jungle, battling mosquitoes. I'm talking the size of your thumbnail. And that's not even mentioning the jaguars or the very real threat of starvation.
Okay, so not exactly a walk in the park.
Not even close. And through it all, you're hauling all this equipment. Telescopes, microscopes, barometers, not to mention mountains of plant samples. And amidst this chaos, you're meticulously observing, sketching, measuring, recording everything you see. This was hardcore exploration, pushing the limits of human endurance, all for the sake of knowledge.
And in the process, he was challenging some pretty deeply held beliefs, right? Like the romanticized idea of the noble savage.
Exactly. That idealized view of indigenous peoples existing in some pristine, untouched wilderness. Humboldt saw firsthand that nature, even in its so-called untouched state, was a realm of competition. It was a constant struggle for survival.
He was seeing through the romanticism, the idyllic portrayals.
He was. He saw how plants vied for sunlight and nutrients, how animals preyed on each other. He recognized this inherent dynamism in nature, this interplay of forces that shaped the natural world.
It's like he was peeling back those layers to reveal the complexities, the sometimes harsh realities.
Precisely. Nature wasn't this static, idyllic paradise. It was dynamic, ever-evolving, driven by competition and a constant struggle for survival.
So no romanticized Garden of Eden.
Not quite, no.
Okay, before we move on to his legacy, his impact, I have to ask, did he, stumble upon anything a bit more, well, relatable to us everyday folks?
You mean besides revolutionizing our understanding of nature? Besides the climate change warnings, the thousands of plant species?
Yeah, besides all that, anything a little less, I don't know, academic?
How about this? The Brazil nut.
Wait, those Brazil nuts? The ones in the grocery store?
The very same. Humboldt didn't discover them, of course, but he did bring them back to Europe. His expeditions brought back samples of this incredible nut, a staple for indigenous populations for centuries.
So Humboldt, the explorer, the scientist, the climate change pioneer, also brought us Brazil nuts.
It's a fun fact, isn't it? But it highlights the unexpected breadth of his impact. He wasn't just this solitary figure gathering data. He was this bridge between worlds, bringing back knowledge, yes, but also these everyday things that enriched our lives.
So Humboldt returns to Europe, right? He's this scientific rock star. Pockets overflowing with data, new species, not to mention a newfound appreciation for Brazil nuts. What's next?
I mean, retirement doesn't exactly seem like his style.
Not a chance. He settles in Paris, which at the time was like the intellectual epicenter of the world. But remember, this is post-revolution France. Napoleon's on the rise. And Humboldt, well, he finds himself in this fascinating position, serving the Prussian king while also, championing revolution in South America.
That's quite the balancing act. How do you even navigate those two worlds?
Yeah. Through his writing, mostly, he throws himself into his work, publishes this just astounding volume of material. I mean, his most ambitious project, the voyage to the equinoctial regions of the new continent, took him decades to complete, and it covered, well, everything. Botany, geology, cultural observations, political analysis, you name it. 30 volumes.
30 volumes. That's a library in itself. But,
Yeah.
okay, say someone wanted to get a sense of Humboldt, the essence of his thinking. Where do they even start?
Views of nature, without a doubt. It's more than just a scientific work. It's practically a work of art. These vivid descriptions of landscapes, these incredibly keen observations of plants, animals. But then woven through it all are these really profound reflections on the interconnectedness of, well, everything. And it's written in this beautiful, almost poetic language.
It sounds like required reading to me. But, I mean, his influence, it went way beyond his own writing, right? Didn't his work have this huge impact on other thinkers, artists even?
Absolutely. Take Darwin, for instance. Humboldt's personal narrative. It was basically Darwin's Bible during his voyage on the Beagle, shaped his observations, sparked his curiosity, and ultimately, I think, helped pave the way for his theory of evolution.
So the father of evolutionary theory was influenced by Humboldt, by his holistic perspective on nature. I mean, that's incredible. Anyone else?
Plenty more. But Thoreau comes to mind. Henry David Thoreau, the American transcendentalist, author of Walden.
Of course.
He was deeply affected by Humboldt's work, too. You can see it in Thoreau's writing, his meticulous observations, that deep, almost spiritual appreciation for nature, for how everything is connected.
It's like Humboldt offered this entirely new framework, a new way to see the world, to make sense of it. But it wasn't just science, was it? You mentioned earlier that even art movements like Art Nouveau were touched by Humboldt. How's that even possible?
It's all about that emphasis on interconnectedness, on, the beauty, the incredible complexity of the natural world. That resonated deeply with artists at the turn of the 20th century. I mean, they were rebelling against industrialization, against this very stark, mechanical way of seeing things. Think Antoni Gaudí, his Sagrada Familia Basilica in Barcelona. It incorporates these tree-like columns, this vaulting that mimics a forest canopy, or Louis Comfort Tiffany. His lamps use those vibrant colors and those flowing, almost organic shapes, all inspired by nature.
Wow. So we're talking about a legacy that stretches from the jungles of South America to the streets of Barcelona, to art, to literature, to the very foundations of how we understand the natural world.
Exactly. And perhaps the most important part of his legacy, especially today, is that warning about humanity's impact on the environment. He saw it, even back then, that we were meddling with forces we didn't fully comprehend, that our actions had consequences.
Consequences that could last for generations. It's a sobering thought, and an important one. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life and work of Alexander von Humboldt, what's the takeaway? What should our listeners carry with them?
Humboldt's life, his work, it's this powerful message. He showed us that understanding nature means seeing those relationships, those connections, those webs, not just a collection of isolated parts. And most importantly, we are not separate from that web. We're active participants. We shape it, and it shapes us.
A profound thought for us all as we face the ecological challenges of the 21st century.
Yeah.
Alexander von Humboldt, explorer, scientist, visionary. His legacy is a testament to the power of curiosity, the importance of seeing the bigger picture, and the enduring interconnectedness of, everything.